The massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were enormous, each one the size of a small city, their hulls covered in strange symbols that glowed with a pale blue light. The Khazaran Collective had traveled for 6 months to reach this system, following old star charts that marked Earth as a resource-rich world. High Procurer Zelthanos stood on the command bridge of the flagship, his forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the planet below. Earth looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans covered most of the surface, with brown and green continents scattered between them. White clouds swirled in patterns across the atmosphere, but something was wrong. The orbital space around the planet was silent. No satellites blinked their signal lights. No defense platforms powered up to challenge the fleet. No communication came from the surface. Still nothing, Zelthanos asked, his translator device converting his clicking speech into standard galactic language. Nothing, High Procurer, replied his second officer. We have scanned all standard frequencies. The planet appears abandoned. Zelthanos felt a wave of satisfaction. The briefing documents had mentioned that human colonies throughout this sector had gone silent decades ago. It seemed the homeworld had suffered the same fate. Perhaps a plague. Perhaps a war. Perhaps they had simply exhausted their resources and died out. It did not matter. What mattered was that Earth contained vast deposits of rare minerals, and now there was no one to stop the collective from taking them. Begin landing operations, Zelthanos ordered. Focus on the mountain ranges on the largest northern continent and the ocean floor in the Great Sea. Deploy mining crawlers and extraction platforms. I want full operations running within 3 planetary rotations. The fleet moved with practiced efficiency. Dozens of smaller ships detached from the main vessels and descended through Earth's atmosphere. They left burning trails across the sky as they fell toward their targets. The people in the small settlements below looked up in wonder and fear. They had not seen spacecraft in 40 years, not since the last supply ship had failed to return from the outer colonies. In a town called Asheville, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, Dr. Sarah Chen stood outside her medical clinic and watched the ships descend. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and tired eyes that had seen too much struggle. Life on Earth had become hard after the colonies stopped sending supplies. The population had dropped from 8 billion to less than 500 million. Most of the advanced technology had broken down. People lived simple lives now, farming and trading, trying to survive. What are they? Asked Tommy, a young boy who helped Sarah at the clinic. I don't know, Sarah said quietly, but I don't think they're human. The ships landed in the mountains 20 miles west of Asheville. The ground shook with their impact. Trees were flattened in circles around each landing site. Then the machines emerged. Massive metal crawlers, each one as tall as a 10-story building with dozens of drilling arms and collection tubes. They began tearing into the mountainside immediately, ripping away soil and stone, extracting the valuable ores beneath. The noise was incredible, a constant grinding, crashing roar that echoed through the valleys. Animals fled in panic. Birds scattered from their nests. And in Asheville, people gathered in the town square, afraid and confused. We should try to contact them, said Mayor Richards, an old man who had served in the merchant fleet before the colonies fell. They might not know we're here, they tried. Using an old radio transmitter that barely worked, they broadcast on every frequency they could manage. This is Asheville Settlement. We are human inhabitants of Earth. Please respond. Please acknowledge. There was no answer. On the flagship, a junior technician named Krev noticed the transmission. He was young for a Khazaran, only 30 cycles old, with bright green scales that marked him as coming from the southern continent of his homeworld. He flagged the signal for his supervisor. We're receiving primitive radio signals from the surface, Krev reported. It appears some of the indigenous population survived. The supervisor barely looked up from his resource calculations. Log it in the report. It doesn't affect operations, but sir, shouldn't we establish contact? The protocols say, the protocols are for civilizations that matter, the supervisor snapped. These are remnants, primitives living in ruins. They have no claim to these resources. Now get back to work. Krev returned to his station, but something felt wrong. He had studied galactic history. He knew that humanity had once been a rising power, spreading to dozens of worlds, developing impressive technology. What had happened to them? And did their fall really give the collective the right to strip their homeworld? The mining operations continued for 3 days. The crawlers dug deeper into the mountains, creating massive pits that scarred the landscape. In the Pacific Ocean, underwater platforms appeared, drilling into the seafloor, sucking up minerals from beneath the continental shelf. And still, the aliens ignored the human transmissions. On the fourth day, disaster struck Asheville. One of the mining crawlers had followed a rich mineral vein directly toward the town. The Kazaran operators saw the settlement on their sensors but considered it insignificant. The resources were more important than a few primitive structures. They gave no warning. They simply continued their work. Sarah was treating a patient when the ground began to shake. At first, she thought it was an earthquake. Then she heard the roar of machinery much closer than before. She ran outside and saw it cresting the ridge above the town. The mining crawler, massive and terrible, its drilling arms spinning, tearing through everything in its path. "Run!" she screamed. "Everyone run!" The people of Asheville fled in panic. 17,000 people lived in the town and the surrounding farms. They ran toward the valleys, toward the river, anywhere away from the approaching machine. But the crawler was fast. It plowed through the outer buildings like they were made of paper. Houses exploded into splinters. The old church, 200 years old, collapsed in seconds. The school where children had learned for generations was crushed under massive treads. Sarah ran with a group of survivors toward the river. Behind her, she could hear the screams of those who couldn't run fast enough. The elderly, the sick, the very young. She forced herself not to look back. She had to survive. Someone had to survive to tell what happened here. The crawler reached the town center and paused. Its collection systems activated, sucking up the valuable minerals from the ground beneath the destroyed buildings. It stayed for 6 hours, systematically processing the area. When it finally moved on, Asheville was gone. In its place was a crater 50 feet deep and half a mile wide. Sarah huddled with 300 other survivors in a cave system near the river. They had no food, no medicine, no shelter except the cold stone around them. Children cried. Adults sat in shock. Mayor Richards was dead, crushed when the town hall collapsed. So many were dead. What do we do? Someone asked in the darkness. Sarah had no answer. What could they do against machines that size? Against aliens who saw them as nothing more than insects in the way. On the flagship, Zelthanos reviewed the daily reports. The mining operations were proceeding ahead of schedule. They had already extracted enough rare minerals to make the entire expedition profitable. Another month of work and they would have enough to supply the collective's needs for a decade. High Procurer, his second officer, reported. There was an incident at Site 7. A native settlement was in the path of crawler operations. Was the crawler damaged? Zelthanos asked. No, sir. It proceeded as normal. Then there is no incident, Zelthanos said dismissively. Continue operations. Krev heard this exchange from his station. He felt sick. 17,000 lives erased, and the High Procurer's only concern was whether the machine was damaged. He thought about reporting this to the ethics board back on the homeworld, but he knew it would do no good. The collective cared about profits, not about primitives on a forgotten world. But deep below the surface, in places the Kazaran sensors could not reach, something was changing. The mining operations had reached a depth of 3 miles in several locations. The drills had broken through layers of rock that had not been disturbed in 50,000 years. They had breached ancient chambers, cut through metal that should not exist at those depths, damaged systems that had been waiting in silence since before modern humans existed. In a facility buried beneath the Antarctic ice, lights flickered on for the first time in millennia. Ancient computers, built with technology that made current galactic standard look primitive, began running diagnostic checks. Data flowed through crystalline networks. Sensors swept across the planet assessing the situation. 17,000 humans dead. Mining operations destroying the surface. Alien ships in orbit. The parameters were clear. Defense Protocol Omega was authorized. In 7 locations around the globe, massive doors began to open. These were not human-made doors, not in the sense that modern humans would recognize. They were carved from the living rock of the planet itself, sealed with force fields that had kept them hidden and protected for 50,000 years. Beneath the Himalayan mountains, a chamber 5 miles wide began to fill with light. Power systems that dwarfed anything the current galaxy possessed came online, drawing energy from Earth's core itself. And in the center of the chamber, suspended in a crystalline matrix, something began to wake. It had been human once, or rather, It had been built by humans infused with a human consciousness, a warrior, a king, a guardian chosen from the greatest of an ancient civilization. Now it was something more, something that existed at the intersection of biology and technology, of human will and cosmic power. Aegis 1 opened its eyes. The consciousness that stirred was vast and complex. It remembered everything. It remembered the towers that had touched the stars, the ships that had crossed between galaxies, the wars that had burned entire worlds. It remembered the choice that had been made, the terrible choice to leave all that power behind, to start over, to try to be better. It remembered its purpose: to guard, to protect, to ensure that humanity would never be destroyed, never be enslaved, never be erased from existence. The mining operations had triggered the ancient protocols. The death of 17,000 humans had confirmed the threat. The time for sleep was over. In the Sahara Desert, beneath tons of sand, another guardian stirred. In the Amazon rainforest, hidden under a pyramid that explorers thought was just an unusual hill, a third guardian woke. In Siberia, under the permafrost, a fourth. In Australia's outback, in the depths of the Mariana Trench, in the ruins of a city buried under 2 miles of Antarctic ice, they all began to wake. 7 guardians, 7 titans, 7 last defenders of humanity, built by an ancient civilization that had possessed godlike power and had chosen to abandon it. They were waking now, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity had been before they chose peace. Sarah Chen sat in the cave, holding a crying child, trying to provide comfort when she had none to give. She did not know that help was coming. She did not know that beneath her feet, ancient machinery was stirring. She only knew that her world had been destroyed and that the aliens would face no consequences. She was wrong about that last part. High Procurer Zelthanos stood on his bridge, satisfied with the progress reports, already planning how he would spend his bonus from this successful harvest. He had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake of his long life. He had no idea that humanity had guardians, and he had no idea that those guardians had just woken up very, very angry. The first sign that something was wrong came from the mining crawler at Site 12, deep in the Himalayan range. The machine had been drilling for 8 hours, reaching depths of 4 miles, when suddenly all of its systems went dead. Not damaged, not malfunctioning, simply powered down, as if something had reached out and switched them off. The operator tried every restart procedure. Nothing worked. Then the communication line went silent. The crawler, all 30,000 tons of it, simply disappeared from the network. High Procurer, we've lost contact with Crawler 12. The technician reported, uncertainty in her voice. All telemetry ceased simultaneously. Zelthanos frowned. The crawlers were built to withstand extreme conditions. Losing one to mechanical failure was rare. Losing one completely was unheard of. Send a recovery team, and increase sensor sweeps of that area. What the sensors found made no sense. Where the crawler should have been, there was now only empty space. The 4-mile deep mining shaft was gone, filled in with solid rock. Not collapsed, filled. As if the mountain had simply closed around the machine and swallowed it whole. Across the planet, similar reports began coming in. Crawlers losing power, drilling platforms in the ocean going dark, equipment being buried under rock and soil that moved like water. The Khazaran engineers had no explanation. Rock did not behave this way. Machines did not simply vanish. Then the seismic readings began. Every seismic station the Khazaran had deployed started registering activity. Not earthquakes, something else. Regular pulses coming from deep underground, from 7 distinct locations spread across the globe. The pulses were synchronized, as if something deep in the planet was beating like a heart. Professor Marcus Webb sat in what remained of the National Archives in Washington, D.C., studying ancient texts by candlelight. At 74, he was one of the few scholars left who remembered the old world, who had devoted his life to preserving human knowledge. Most of his colleagues had died in the collapse. He remained alone with thousands of books that few people cared about anymore. But Marcus had found something strange in recent weeks. References in texts from a dozen different ancient cultures, all saying similar things. Stories about the sleepers beneath, guardians who waited in the deep places of the world, protectors who would wake when humanity faced extinction. He had dismissed it as mythology. Every culture had stories like that. But now, with the aliens tearing apart the planet, with Asheville destroyed and other settlements threatened, Marcus found himself hoping the stories were true. The ground beneath the archives began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling. Marcus grabbed his books and headed for the door, but then he stopped. The trembling was not random. It had a rhythm, a pulse, and it was growing stronger. In the cave near what had been Asheville, Sarah Chen felt it too. The survivors had been there for 4 days, living on water from the river and whatever food they had managed to grab while fleeing. Many were sick. Some had died from injuries. They were losing hope. Then the earth began to sing. That was the only way Sarah could describe it. A deep vibration that came up through the stone, that resonated in her bones, that seemed to carry meaning without words. The children stopped crying. The adults looked up from their despair. Everyone felt it. Something was happening. "What is that?" whispered Tommy, the boy from the clinic. Sarah shook her head. She did not know. But for the first time in days, she felt something other than hopelessness. She felt like something was about to change. In the Himalayan chamber, Aegis 1 rose from its crystalline matrix. The Guardian stood 300 meters tall, a figure that blended organic curves with geometric precision, covered in armor that seemed to shift between solid metal and flowing energy. Its face was both human and alien, beautiful and terrible, eyes that glowed with inner light opened and looked upon the world. The Guardian's consciousness expanded, connecting to the global network that had lain dormant for 50 millennia. In an instant, it knew everything. It knew about the collapse of human civilization, about the colonies that had failed, about the long decline into primitive survival. It knew about the Khazaran Collective and their mining operations. It knew about Asheville and the 17,000 dead. It knew and it judged. The mountain above Aegis 1 began to open. Not explosively, but fluidly, as if the stone remembered it was meant to move. The rock flowed aside, creating a passage 300 meters wide that led from the ancient chamber to the surface. Snow and ice slid away. The morning sun touched the Guardian's face for the first time in 50,000 years. Aegis 1 stepped forward and emerged into the world. The Khazaran monitoring station 50 miles away registered the event immediately. A massive heat signature had just appeared on the planet's surface, then a gravitational anomaly, then energy readings that exceeded anything in their databases. High Procurer, the sensor operator's voice was panicked now. Something just emerged in the Himalayan range. Recommend immediate withdrawal of all personnel in that sector. Silthanos moved to the sensor display. What he saw there made no sense. The readings indicated something 300 meters tall, generating power levels that should require a fusion reactor the size of a moon. But it was moving, walking, and it was heading toward the nearest mining site. "What is that?" Zelthanos demanded. "Unknown, sir, but it's definitely artificial. And definitely active. Send combat drones to investigate. If it's a defense system, destroy it." Krev watched from his station as a squadron of 20 combat drones launched from the fleet. These were serious military hardware, each one armed with plasma cannons and kinetic missiles. They screamed through Earth's atmosphere at 10 times the speed of sound, targeting the anomaly in the Himalayas. Aegis 1 watched them come. The Guardian did not move, did not react, simply stood and observed as the drones closed to firing range. When they opened fire, the Guardian spoke for the first time in 50,000 years. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It spoke in every human language simultaneously, but also in the languages of the Khazaran and the other species represented in the collective's fleet. It spoke through their communication systems, through their computers, through the air itself. "You have violated the sacred ground of Earth. You have murdered the children of humanity. You have 7 hours to withdraw all personnel and equipment from this world. If you do not comply, you will be removed. This is your only warning." The drones fired. Plasma bolts and missiles struck the Guardian, explosions blooming across its armored surface. The firepower was enough to level a city block. When the smoke cleared, Aegis 1 stood unchanged, not even scorched. The weapons had simply failed to harm it. The Guardian raised one hand. The gesture was almost casual. The drones stopped in midair, frozen as if time itself had halted. Then they began to disassemble. Not exploding, not breaking, simply coming apart, every bolt and wire and circuit separating neatly, floating in the air like pieces of a puzzle. Then the pieces reformed, but differently. The weapon systems were removed. The fuel cells were drained. The AI cores were wiped clean. In 30 seconds, 20 combat drones became 20 helpless metal sculptures that fell gently to the ground. On the flagship, every officer on the bridge stood in stunned silence. "What did we just see?" Zelthanos asked quietly. No one answered. They had no answer. Technology that could stop time, disassemble molecular bonds, reprogram matter itself? Such things existed in theoretical physics, but no civilization in the galaxy had ever achieved them. The collective had access to the most advanced technology in known space, and they could not do what that thing had just done. "High Procurer," Krev spoke up from his station. "I recommend we take its warning seriously. We should withdraw." Zelthanos spun on him. "Withdraw? From one ancient defense system? We have 1,000 ships in this fleet. We have firepower that can crack a planet. I will not run from primitive technology." But even as he spoke, 6 more signatures appeared on the sensors. 6 more impossibly powerful readings emerging from 6 other locations around the globe. Antarctica, Sahara, Amazon, Siberia, Australia, Mariana Trench. 7 total. 7 impossible things that should not exist. The Guardians had awakened. In Antarctica, Aegis II rose through 2 miles of ice. The glacier simply opened before it, creating a passage that closed behind as the Guardian passed. This one was different from Aegis I, more angular, more mechanical, covered in weapon systems that looked organic but functioned with terrifying precision. In the Sahara, Aegis III emerged from beneath the sand, shaking off dunes that had covered it for millennia. This Guardian was sleeker, built for speed, its armor flowing like liquid metal. In the Amazon, Aegis IV rose from a pyramid that explorers had thought was natural, its form covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. In Siberia, Aegis V broke through the permafrost, its massive form radiating cold instead of heat, frost forming in the air around it. In Australia, Aegis VI stepped out of a crater that had been thought to be a meteor impact, its body carved with circuits that glowed like captured starlight. And in the Mariana Trench, Aegis VII rose from the deepest part of the ocean, walking on the seafloor, climbing up through 7 miles of water that parted before it like a curtain. 7 Guardians, 7 Titans, 7 defenders of humanity, created by an ancient civilization that had possessed power beyond comprehension. They began to move, each one heading toward the nearest concentration of Khazaran forces. They did not hurry. They did not need to. They simply walked, and the earth itself seemed to move with them. Marcus Webb stood outside the archives watching Aegis IV pass in the distance. The Guardian was 50 miles away, but at its size he could see it clearly, striding through the sky like a walking mountain. Other survivors came out of their hiding places, staring in wonder and fear. "What are they?" someone asked. Marcus smiled, tears running down his weathered face. "They're us. They're what we were. They're our ancestors' last gift." In the cave, Sarah saw Aegis I through the entrance, walking past their location. The Guardian paused and turned its massive head toward them. Sarah felt its gaze, felt an intelligence vast and ancient looking at her. Then the Guardian spoke, and this time its voice was gentle, almost sad. "Be not afraid, children of Earth. You are remembered. You are protected. No harm will come to you while we stand." Then it continued on its way, heading toward the mining operations in the mountains. On the flagship, panic was setting in. The 7 impossibly powerful entities were spreading out across the planet, each one targeting Khazaran operations. The High Procurer's fleet was the most powerful force in this sector. But Zelthanos had the terrible feeling that it was not going to be enough. "Send a priority message to the homeworld," he ordered. "Tell them we've encountered unknown defensive technology on Earth. Request instructions and possible reinforcements." The reply would take 6 months to arrive. They were on their own. Aegis I reached the first mining site 40 minutes after emerging. 20 crawlers were working in a massive pit, tearing apart a mountain to extract rare earths. 100 Khazaran workers operated the machines. When they saw the Guardian approaching, most of them fled. A few braver souls stayed at their posts, activating the site's defensive weapons. The Guardian did not fight. It simply walked into the pit and began picking up the crawlers. Gently, carefully. Each machine weighing 30,000 tons was lifted as if it were made of paper. The Guardian placed them all in a neat row outside the pit, away from the excavation. Then it knelt down and placed both hands on the torn earth. The ground began to heal. Rock flowed like water, filling the pit, restoring the mountain to its original shape. Soil spread across the restored stone. Seeds sprouted and grew at impossible speed. Within 10 minutes, the mountain was whole again, covered in forest as if the mining operation had never existed. The Kazarun workers watched in awe and terror. This was not destruction. This was creation. This was power that could reshape worlds with a thought. Aegis 1 stood and looked at them. When it spoke, its voice was firm but not cruel. Go back to your ships. Tell your leaders that Earth is not abandoned. Tell them humanity has protectors. Tell them that if they leave peacefully, no harm will come to them. But if they continue their violation of this world, they will face consequences beyond their understanding. Then the Guardian turned and walked toward the next mining site. 6 hours remained on the deadline. High Procurer Zelthanos refused to accept what was happening. He had built his career on the principle that superior technology and firepower always won. The Kazaran Collective controlled 12 star systems and traded with 50 more. They had weapons that could shatter asteroids and shields that could withstand stellar radiation. These primitive Earth Guardians, no matter how impressive their initial display, could not possibly stand against the full might of his fleet. Prepare the orbital bombardment platforms, he ordered. Target all 7 anomalies. If they will not be intimidated, they will be destroyed. Crave stood at his station, his claws trembling as he input the targeting data he had been ordered to provide. Everything in his training, everything in his moral code told him this was wrong. But he was junior crew. His objections meant nothing. The bombardment platforms were the fleet's most powerful weapons. Each one could release energy equivalent to a nuclear detonation. 20 platforms locked onto the 7 Guardian positions. The firing solution was perfect. In theory, nothing could survive the coordinated strike. Fire, Zelthanos commanded. 20 beams of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit, each one bright enough to blind anyone who looked directly at them. They struck the Guardian simultaneously. The explosions were visible from space, mushroom clouds rising into the atmosphere. Seismic sensors registered impacts equivalent to massive earthquakes. For a moment, the crew of the flagship allowed themselves to hope. Then the sensors cleared and they saw the truth. All 7 Guardians stood exactly where they had been. Unharmed, unchanged. The orbital bombardment, enough firepower to level entire cities, had done nothing. Worse than nothing. As the crew watched, the Guardians raised their heads and looked up toward space, toward the fleet itself. Aegis 1's voice came through every communication system on every ship. You were warned. You chose violence. Now you will learn the difference between your weapons and ours. The Guardian raised both arms toward the sky. Reality bent around it, space itself warping in visible waves. Then something impossible happened. The bombardment platform, safely in orbit 200 miles above the surface, simply stopped working. Their power cores went dead. Their systems failed. And then, like the drones before them, they began to disassemble. Piece by piece, the massive weapons platforms came apart. Metal peeled away in neat strips. Circuits separated from their housings. Fuel cells drained harmlessly into space. The crew inside were gently transported to nearby ships before their vessels dissolved. Within minutes, 20 planetary bombardment platforms became clouds of component parts floating in orbit. Then those parts began to fall, not randomly, not destructively. They fell in controlled streams that Aegis 7, the Ocean Guardian, caught and guided into the deepest parts of the Pacific. No debris would harm the planet. Every piece was accounted for and disposed of safely. Zelthanos stared at the displays, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. How? He whispered. How is this possible? High Procurer, his science officer said quietly. I have been analyzing the Guardian energy signatures. The power source they are using, it is not anything in our database. It appears to be drawing energy directly from the planet's core, from the quantum vacuum, possibly from dimensional spaces we cannot even detect. The technology is thousands of years beyond anything the galaxy currently possesses. That cannot be, Zelthanos said. Humans were barely space-capable when their colonies failed. They had no such technology. Modern humans do not, the science officer agreed. But what if these are not modern human creations? What if humans had a previous advanced phase? What if they fell and rose again? And we only know about their recent civilization. The idea was horrifying. It meant the galaxy's entire understanding of humanity was wrong. It meant they had just attacked the remnants of a civilization that might have once been more powerful than any current species. Krev pulled up his console and began searching through the fleet's database. As a technician, He had access to more detailed information than most crew. He started looking at the historical files about humanity, particularly the earliest contact reports. What he found made his blood run cold. The Khazaran collective had encountered humans 200 years ago. When humans had just begun exploring their local star cluster, the humans had seemed friendly but technologically inferior. The collective had noted them as a species with potential but nothing special. But there were anomalies in the reports. Human DNA was too varied, suggesting either recent genetic manipulation or a very old species. Human archaeological records had strange gaps, entire periods where civilization seemed to appear fully formed, and there were ruins on several human colony worlds, ruins that dated to millions of years before humans supposedly evolved. High Procurer, Krev said hesitantly, I think we need to reconsider our position. The historical data suggests humanity might be far older than we thought. It does not matter how old they are, Zelthanos snapped. We still have over 900 ships and thousands of troops. He was interrupted by an alarm. All across the fleet, ships began reporting systems failures. Not attacks, not damage. Simply, gradually, components were failing. Life support remained functional, but weapons, shields, and faster-than-light drives were going offline one by one. Aegis 3, the speed-focused Guardian in the Sahara, had moved. It had moved so fast that sensors had barely registered the motion. In the span of 30 seconds, it had reached orbit, passed through the fleet like a ghost, and returned to Earth. And in that passage, it had done something to every ship. The Guardian had left something behind. Small devices no bigger than a human hand attached to critical systems throughout the fleet. The devices were not weapons. They were limiters. Governors. They prevented the ships from being used for violence but left everything else functional. We are dead in space, the tactical officer reported. We cannot fight. We cannot flee. We can only sit here and wait. Zelthanos slumped into his command chair. His career was over. His fleet was helpless, and he still did not understand how any of this was possible. On Earth, Sarah Chen was trying to process everything she had seen. The Guardians had spent the last 2 hours systematically dismantling every mining operation on the planet, not destroying them but carefully removing them. Workers were evacuated safely. Equipment was transported to designated areas. The planet was being restored. Mountains were being healed. Forests were being regrown. It was like watching gods at work. She had to know more. She had to understand. So she did something insane. She walked toward Aegis 1, which was working on restoring the site where Asheville had been. The Guardian was using its power to literally rebuild the mountain, to put back every ton of stone that had been removed. Please, Sarah called out. I need to understand. What are you? Where did you come from? The Guardian paused in its work. It turned its massive head toward her, and Sarah felt that cosmic gaze focus on her specifically. Then gently Aegis 1 reached down with one enormous hand and lifted Sarah into the air, bringing her up to face level. This close, she could see that the Guardian's surface was not metal or stone, but something that shifted between states of matter, solid and liquid, and energy all at once. You wish to know the truth? The Guardian asked. Its voice surrounded her but did not harm her, calibrated perfectly to her human hearing. Very well. You have earned the right. But be warned, the truth is heavy. The Guardian's eyes began to glow brighter, and suddenly Sarah was not just seeing, she was experiencing. Memories flowed into her mind. Not her memories, but the Guardian's. Memories that stretched back 50,000 years. She saw Earth as it had been in the deep past. Not the primitive world of stone tools and cave paintings. Instead, she saw cities that made modern metropolises look like toys. Towers that reached into space, built of materials that could not exist according to current physics. She saw humans who had mastered gravity, time, dimensional travel. She saw a civilization that had spread to the stars millions of years ago, that had seeded life on thousands of worlds. But she also saw the darkness, the wars, the genocides, the casual cruelty of a species that had become so powerful that nothing could stop them. She saw what humanity had become when they had unlimited power and no limits on their actions. Then she saw the choice, the greatest humans of that ancient time, the philosophers and poets and artists. They looked at what their species had become, and they were horrified. They could not stop the wars by force, because they would just be adding more violence to an already blood-soaked galaxy. So they made a different choice. They chose to start over. They built the Guardians as a last defense, a guarantee that Earth itself could never be destroyed or enslaved. Then they used technology beyond imagining to wipe themselves out. Not completely. They left survivors, small populations scattered across the planet, their memories erased, their technology destroyed. They gave humanity a chance to grow again from the beginning, to develop new cultures, to hopefully choose better paths. We were monsters, Aegis One said softly. So we chose to die and let our children try again. You, the humans of this era, you are those children. You inherited nothing of the old empire except Earth itself, and the potential to become great again. But you also inherited the choice we made, the decision to value life over power. Sarah was crying. The weight of that history, of that terrible, beautiful sacrifice was overwhelming. And you? She asked. You remember all of it? How can you bear it? We remember so that you do not have to, the Guardian replied. We carry the burden of the past so that you may be free to build the future. We sleep until we are needed, and we wake to protect you from those who would take that future away. The vision faded. Sarah found herself back in the Guardian's hand, back in the present moment. Aegis One gently lowered her to the ground. Now you know, the Guardian said. Now you understand why we cannot allow your world to be violated. This is not just your home. This is the grave of 1 billion souls who chose to die rather than continue their evil. We honor their choice by protecting what they left behind. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She watched as the Guardian returned to its work. Watched as the mountain slowly reformed. Watched as the scar on the Earth healed. In orbit, Zelthanos finally understood that he had lost. His fleet was helpless. His weapons were useless. And now, looking at the analysis his crew had put together, he realized the full scope of his mistake. The Guardians were not attacking. They were showing restraint. If they wanted to, they could probably destroy the entire fleet in minutes. They could certainly destroy his homeworld if they chose to visit it, but they had not done any of that. They had disabled the weapons but left life support. They had prevented violence but not killed anyone. They were giving the collective a chance to leave peacefully. Open a channel, Zelthanos ordered. Broadcast on all frequencies. I want the Guardians to hear this. The channel opened. Zelthanos took a deep breath and spoke words he had never thought he would say. This is High Procureur Zelthanos of the Khazaran Collective. I acknowledge your warning. I acknowledge your right to defend your world. I formally request permission to evacuate all collective personnel and equipment from Earth. We will depart and not return. Please allow my people to leave safely. There was silence for a long moment. Then Aegis One's voice came through the speakers. Your request is granted. You have 24 hours to evacuate all personnel and remove all equipment. Any material that cannot be removed will be cataloged and held in orbit for future return. You will not be harmed if you comply with these terms. But know this, Procureur. We are uploading data to your ships. Information about humanity's history. Proof of what we were and what we chose to become. Share this with your people. Let them understand that humanity is not defenseless, merely dormant. Let them know that Earth is protected. Files began appearing in the fleet's computers. Thousands of documents, images, video records, genetic data. Evidence of a civilization that had existed millions of years ago. That had possessed technology to reshape reality itself. And that had chosen to abandon all of it for a chance at redemption. One more thing, Aegis One continued. The humans of Asheville. You destroyed their home and killed 17,000 souls. This cannot be undone, but it will be remembered. We do not seek revenge, but we do seek justice. The collective will provide restitution, resources, technology, aid to help the survivors rebuild, not as payment for lives lost, but as acknowledgement of responsibility. Do you accept these terms? Zelthanos looked at his crew. He looked at the displays showing the helpless fleet. He thought about his career, his reputation, his pride. Then he thought about the 17,000 dead and the weight of responsibility. We accept, he said. The collective will provide restitution as specified. Then we have an accord, Aegis One said. Evacuate your forces, and do not return unless invited. The Khazaran fleet began the process of withdrawal. It would take the full 24 hours to collect all personnel and equipment, but they worked efficiently, driven by the fear of what would happen if they missed the deadline. Krev volunteered for one of the surface recovery teams, wanting to see Earth up close before they left. He found himself working near the site where Asheville had been. The Guardian was still there, still working on restoration. Krev approached cautiously, his translator ready. "Guardian," he called out. "May I speak with you?" Aegis One turned to regard him. "You are the one who questioned the orders, the one who spoke for restraint." "How did you know?" Krev asked, surprised. "We hear everything that happens on this world. We know every word spoken, every choice made. Your conscience honors you, young one. What do you wish to ask?" "Why did humans give up such power?" Krev asked. "My people, we have pursued advancement for generations. We seek to grow, to improve, to become more capable. How could humanity choose to step backward?" The Guardian was silent for a moment, then it spoke with deep sadness. "There is a difference between advancement and improvement. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Your people seek capability without asking what that capability is for. Ancient humans learned that lesson after it was too late. They had the power to reshape galaxies, but they had lost the wisdom to know when not to, so they chose to start over, hoping their descendants would find a better balance." Krev thought about that. He thought about his own civilization and its relentless pursuit of resources and territory. "Do you think we need to learn that lesson too?" "Every species must learn it eventually," Aegis One replied. "The only question is whether they learn it in time or too late. We hope your people choose the former." With that, the Guardian returned to its work, and Krev returned to his ship, his mind full of questions that would take a lifetime to answer. The evacuation was nearly complete. 20 hours had passed since the accord, and the Khazaran collective had worked with desperate efficiency to remove all personnel and equipment from Earth. Zelthanos sat on his bridge, watching the final shuttles return from the surface. In 4 more hours, this nightmare would be over. His career was ruined, but at least his people would survive. Then every alarm on every ship began screaming at once. "High Procurer!" The sensor officer's voice was panicked. "Multiple faster than light. Signatures detected. Large fleet emerging from jump space at the system's edge." Zelthanos felt his blood turn cold. "Identify them." "Scanning now. Sir, it is a coalition fleet. 17 different species. Over 2,000 ships. They are broadcasting on all frequencies, demanding we stand down and allow them to take control of Earth's resources." This was worse than anything Zelthanos had imagined. Word of Earth's riches must have spread. Pirates, corporate raiders, and opportunistic governments had formed an alliance to seize what the collective had found. They would have been monitoring the collective's communications, would have seen the reports of valuable minerals, and now they had arrived with overwhelming force. "High Procurer, they are hailing us. They want to speak with you directly." Zelthanos accepted the communication. A holographic display activated, showing a council of 17 alien commanders from different species. The one who spoke was a Vorath, a reptilian species known for their aggressive business practices. "Zelthanos," the Vorath said with a predatory smile, "we have reviewed your reports. Earth is indeed a valuable prize, too valuable for one faction to claim. We represent a coalition of 17 species, and we have come to liberate these resources for the benefit of all. Stand aside, and you may retain a small percentage of the profits. Resist, and we will take everything." "You do not understand what you are doing," Zelthanos said urgently. "Earth is protected. There are defense systems here that—" "We have reviewed your sensor logs," the Vorath interrupted. 7 large constructs of unknown origin. Impressive, certainly, but we have 2,000 ships and weapons specifically, designed to counter every type of defensive system known to galactic science. Your 7 Guardians will fall, and then the planet will be ours. You need to leave." Zelthanos tried again. "I am not protecting my claim. I am trying to save your lives. The Guardians are beyond anything you have encountered. They are ancient technology that has been dormant for millennia." The Vorath cut him off. "Ancient means obsolete. We have the advantage of modern weapons and tactics. Now stand aside." The communication cut off. The coalition fleet began moving toward Earth at combat speed. 2,000 ships, bristling with weapons, shields at maximum, ready for war. On Earth, Aegis One felt the new arrivals before any human sensor could detect them. The Guardian stood still for a moment, processing the situation. The Khazaran had learned their lesson. These new arrivals had not. Very well. If they wanted a demonstration of what ancient humanity could do, they would receive one. Siblings, Aegis 1 broadcast to the other 6 Guardians. We have new guests. They come in violence. Let us show them why the ancients were feared. Shall we hold back? Aegis 3 asked. No, Aegis 1 replied. These fools threaten not just Earth but the lesson we tried to teach the Khazaran. They must be shown the truth. They must understand what humanity chose to abandon. Activate the dormant installations. Wake the old systems. Let Earth speak. Around the planet, things that had been hidden for 50,000 years began to stir. On the moon, craters that had been thought natural split open, revealing massive installations beneath. On Mars, the red dust began to blow away from structures buried under centuries of accumulation. On Venus, beneath the crushing atmosphere and acid clouds, ancient facilities powered on for the first time since the Age of Legends. Sarah Chen stood with Marcus Webb and the survivors of Asheville, watching the sky. They could not see the approaching fleet yet, but Aegis 1 had warned them. Another battle was coming. Sarah felt fear, but also something else. Pride. Whatever happened next, humanity would not go quietly into extinction. Dr. Chen, Marcus said quietly, looking at the data pad he had been given by the Guardian. I have been reading the historical files. Did you know that humans seeded life on 23 worlds? Not just colonies, but actual biological seeding. We modified our DNA and adapted it to different environments, then let those populations evolve naturally over millions of years. What are you saying? Sarah asked. I am saying that many of the species in the galaxy today, they have human DNA in their ancestry. We are their distant cousins, and they do not even know it. Sarah stared at him. You mean the Khazaran? Among others. The genetic markers are clear. Millions of years ago, ancient humans spread across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Then, they disappeared, and their children evolved in their absence. The galaxy is full of humanity's descendants, and they think they are alien to us. The implications were staggering. The coalition fleet coming to attack Earth, many of them might be attacking their own distant homeworld without knowing it. Aegis 1's voice suddenly rang out across the entire planet and broadcast into space on every frequency, using every communication method known to galactic science and several that were not. Attention, coalition fleet. You are approaching Earth, the sacred ground of humanity's rebirth. You are approaching the grave of 1 trillion souls who chose death over tyranny. You are approaching the protected world of the Guardians. This is your only warning. Turn back or face the consequences. On the coalition command ship, the 17 leaders laughed. Consequences? The Vorath said. What consequences can 7 ancient machines possibly pose to our fleet? Attack formation. Target those Guardians. The fleet split into battle groups, each one assigned to engage a specific Guardian. They moved with precision, demonstrating excellent coordination. These were experienced military forces, not pirates or raiders. They knew what they were doing. Aegis 1 looked up at the approaching fleet and sighed. They have chosen, siblings, demonstration mode. Show them level 1. Level 1. It was a classification from the ancient military, indicating the least amount of force necessary to neutralize a threat without destruction. The Guardians had 7 levels. No enemy in galactic history had ever survived seeing level 4. The Pacific Ocean began to drain. It was impossible. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. The entire Pacific Ocean, billions of gallons of water, began flowing downward into massive channels that opened in the seafloor. The water did not disappear. It was being moved, redirected into vast underground reservoirs that had been built to hold it. Within minutes, the Pacific Basin was exposed, revealing the seafloor. And on that seafloor stood a city 500 miles across, built of materials that gleamed in the sudden sunlight, towers that would dwarf anything modern humans had ever constructed, platforms and streets and structures of such complexity that they hurt to look at. And in the center of it all, a single tower that stretched up 10 miles into the sky, pulsing with contained power. Behold, Aegis 1 said, its voice carrying to every ship in the coalition fleet. This is what humanity built in its youth. This is what we chose to bury and forget. This is a city that housed 10 million souls, that could withstand the destruction of planets, that could tap into the fundamental forces of reality itself. This is a fraction of a percent of what we once were. The coalition fleet slowed, staring at the revealed city. The data they were receiving made no sense. The materials were unknown. The energy signatures were off the scale. The technological level was beyond anything that should exist. "It is a trick," the Vorath commander said, but his voice was uncertain. "It must be a hologram, a projection meant to frighten us." "You want proof it is real?" Aegis I asked. "Very well." The Guardian gestured toward Mars. The red planet hung in space, clearly visible from Earth orbit. And before the stunned gaze of the coalition fleet, Mars began to change. The red dust blew away in artificial winds, revealing green beneath. Ice caps melted and spread across the surface as liquid water. An atmosphere formed, thick and breathable. Clouds gathered and rain began to fall. In 6 hours, Mars went from a dead world to a living paradise. "This is terraforming," Aegis I explained. "The process your species believe takes centuries. We can do it in hours. We have the power to reshape worlds at will. This is what ancient humanity could do before breakfast." The coalition fleet hung in space, utterly silent. Every commander was staring at their sensors, trying to comprehend what they were seeing. The Vorath's voice came over the channel, much quieter now. "If you have such power, why did you let your civilization fall? Why did you not conquer the galaxy?" "Because we did conquer the galaxy," Aegis I replied. "And we became monsters in the process. We had the power to reshape reality, but we used it for war, for domination, for cruelty. So our greatest leaders made a choice. They chose to destroy everything we had built, to give our descendants a chance to start over, to hopefully become better than we were. These Guardians are the only remnant of that old empire, preserved to ensure Earth could never be destroyed or enslaved." The Guardian raised both arms. Around it, the other 6 Guardians did the same, and reality began to bend. High above Earth, in the space between the planet and the moon, something began to form. Energy gathered, drawn from quantum foam, from zero-point fields, from dimensions that folded in on themselves. The energy compressed, spun, ignited. A miniature star was born, burning with clean fusion fire, shedding light and warmth across the entire orbital space. "We can create stars," Aegis I said quietly. "We can move planets. We can tear holes in space and time. We can do things that your species cannot even dream of. This is what we chose to leave behind. This is what we chose to bury beneath the sea and under the mountains. This is the power we decided was too dangerous for anyone to possess." The Guardian's voice hardened. "And you small, young, foolish species, you dare to come here and threaten what we protect? You dare to tell us that your 2,000 ships are a threat to us? We who once commanded fleets that numbered in the millions? We who once held power over the fundamental forces of existence?" Aegis I gestured again. The moon began to move. Not orbit, but actually reposition itself, sliding through space at a sedate pace, demonstrating that even celestial bodies were toys to this technology. The moon moved several thousand miles from its usual position, then stopped. The tides on Earth shifted but remained controlled, the Guardian carefully managing all effects to prevent harm to the planet below. "We are showing you level 1, Aegis I continued. "The least amount of our capability. We have not attacked. We have not destroyed. We have merely demonstrated what we can do. Do you understand now? Do you comprehend the difference between your weapons and ours?" On the Coalition command ship, 17 commanders sat in stunned silence. The Vorath was shaking, his reptilian eyes wide with fear. One of the other commanders, an insectoid species, spoke in a voice that trembled. "What would level 2 look like?" "You do not want to know," Aegis I replied. "No one has survived seeing level 4. There has never been a need for level 5, 6, or 7. Please do not make us demonstrate further. We are trying to honor the choice our creators made. We are trying to show restraint. But if you continue to threaten Earth, if you force our hand, we will do what we were built to do, and you will not survive it." The Guardian's voice softened slightly. "We do not wish to kill you. We do not wish to repeat the mistakes of the past. Ancient humanity was a plague on the galaxy, and they chose extinction rather than continue their evil. We honor that choice by protecting the new humanity, by ensuring they have a chance to be better, but we will not allow Earth to be violated. We will not allow humans to be enslaved or exterminated. This is our purpose. This is our oath. And we will fulfill it no matter the cost. The miniature star continued to burn above the planet. Mars continued to bloom with new life. The Pacific Ocean began to slowly refill, the ancient city sinking back into its hiding place. And the Coalition fleet sat paralyzed, unable to advance, unwilling to retreat, caught between greed and terror. "You have a choice," Aegis once said. "You can leave now peacefully and we will forget this incident. Or you can attack, and we will show you why the ancient humans were feared throughout the galaxy. Choose." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the Coalition ships began to turn away from Earth. The insectoid commander was first, his fleet jumping to faster-than-light speeds as quickly as their drives could charge. Others followed. The Vorath held out the longest, pride warring with survival instinct. Finally, he spoke. "We are leaving, but this is not over. The galaxy must know what exists here. The galaxy must know that such power still exists." "Yes," Aegis One agreed. "Let them know. Let every species understand that Earth is protected. Let them understand what humanity once was and what they chose to become. Let them learn the lesson we are trying to teach. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. We had ultimate power, and we chose to abandon it. That choice is what makes us worthy of protection." The Vorath ship turned and joined the Exodus. Within an hour, the entire Coalition fleet had jumped away, fleeing to their home systems to report what they had seen. In orbit, the Khazaran fleet remained. Zelthanos opened a channel to the surface. "Guardian," he said, "the Coalition has fled. The threat is ended. My people are ready to depart as agreed." "You may leave," Aegis One replied, "and take a message to your leaders. Earth is under protection. Humanity is rebuilding. When they are ready, when they choose to reach out to the galaxy again, it will be on their terms. Until then, this world is closed to outsiders. Tell everyone. Tell the galaxy. We will," Zelthanos promised. "And Guardian, for what it is worth, I am sorry. Sorry for the destruction we caused. Sorry for the lives we took. We did not understand. Now you do," the Guardian said. "That is enough. Go in peace." The Khazaran fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the stars, carrying with them the truth about humanity's past and present. For 3 days after the Coalition fleet departed, Earth was quiet. The Guardians stood at their posts around the globe, watchful but passive. The miniature star they had created continued to orbit the planet, a second sun that provided additional light and warmth. Mars bloomed with new life, its transformation complete. The moon had been returned to its proper position with such precision that most humans on the surface had never even noticed it had moved. Sarah Chen stood in what would become New Asheville. The Guardians had not just restored the land, they had improved it. The soil was richer, the water cleaner, the foundation more stable. Buildings were being constructed using materials provided by Aegis One, advanced composites that were stronger than steel but light as wood. The survivors were rebuilding, and for the first time in decades they had hope. Professor Marcus Webb had established a new archive in a building near the town center. The Guardians had provided him with copies of all the ancient records, millions of documents detailing humanity's true history. He would spend the rest of his life studying them, and probably only scratch the surface. "It is overwhelming," Marcus said as Sarah visited him. "Every time I think I understand the scope of what ancient humans achieved, I find something new that redefines the limits. Did you know they had not just interstellar travel but intergalactic? They crossed the gulfs between galaxies as easily as we walk between towns. Why did they come here?" Sarah asked. "If they were that advanced, why choose Earth?" Marcus pulled up a file on his screen. According to these records, they were refugees. There was a war in their home galaxy, a war so terrible that it destroyed entire galactic clusters. The survivors fled, looking for somewhere untouched, somewhere they could start fresh. They found Earth, this beautiful little world with no intelligent life, and they decided to make it their refuge. "And then they gave it all up," Sarah said quietly. "Not exactly," Marcus corrected. "They made a choice. After 1,000,000 years of war and conquest, they realized they had become the very thing they were fleeing from. They had become conquerors, destroyers, monsters. So their greatest minds proposed an experiment. What if they started over? What if they wiped the slate clean and tried to become something better?" Sarah sat down, absorbing this. "So modern humans, we are the experiment?" We are the hope, Marcus said. We are what they hoped they could become, if they could only forget the terrible things they had done and learned. Every human alive today is descended from those who chose peace over power. We are the proof that the experiment worked. A chime sounded from Marcus's computer. He looked at the notification and his eyes widened. Sarah, you need to see this. It is a message from Aegis 1. The Guardian wants to speak with us. They found Aegis 1 in the valley where Asheville had once stood. The massive Guardian was kneeling, making itself smaller, less intimidating. Other survivors were gathered there too, hundreds of people who had come to see the being that had saved them. Humans of Earth, Aegis 1 said, its voice gentle now, almost sad. I have called you here because a decision must be made. A decision that is yours alone, the Guardian gestured. And holographic displays appeared in the air, showing images of the galaxy, of hundreds of worlds, of countless species going about their lives. Word of what happened here is spreading, Aegis 1 continued. The Khazaran and the Coalition fleet have told their people about Earth, about the Guardians, about humanity's ancient past. Soon every species in the galaxy will know. They will know that humans once possessed power beyond measure. They will know that we Guardians still possess that power. And they will have questions. The hologram shifted, showing images of alien leaders in conference, of fleets gathering, of news broadcasts in languages humans could not speak but could understand the tone of. Fear, curiosity, greed, respect. The revelation of humanity's past had shaken the entire galactic community. Some will fear you, Aegis 1 said. They will worry that modern humans might reclaim the old power, might become what your ancestors were. Some will seek alliance, hoping to benefit from association with the species that once ruled the stars. Some will plot and scheme, trying to find ways to steal Guardian technology. And some will simply watch and wonder what you will do next. Sarah stepped forward. What do you think we should do? The Guardian's massive head turned to look at her directly. That is not for me to decide. I am a tool, a weapon, a protector. But I'm not human. I was built by humans, I carry human consciousness within me. But I'm not part of your society. The choice of how humanity engages with the galaxy, that must be made by humans. But you could advise us, Sarah pressed. You remember everything. You know what worked and what failed. You could guide us. I could, Aegis 1 agreed. But that is the path to dependence. Ancient humanity fell because they relied too much on their machines, on their power, on their technology. They forgot how to be truly human. I will not make that mistake with modern humanity. You must find your own path, make your own choices, even if those choices lead to failure. Only through genuine choice can you grow. Marcus spoke up from the crowd. Then tell us this, Guardian. What was the worst mistake ancient humanity made? If we could learn one lesson from their failure, what should it be? Aegis 1 was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of ages. They forgot that power is not the same as worth. They measured themselves and others by capability, by strength, by what they could do rather than who they chose to be. They conquered 1,000 worlds and thought that made them great. They commanded technologies that could reshape reality and thought that made them wise. But greatness and wisdom do not come from power. They come from the choices we make when we have power. The Guardian gestured to the gathered humans. You, the people of modern Earth, you have lived through collapse and struggle. You have survived when everything was taken from you. You rebuilt with your bare hands. You found ways to hope when hope seemed foolish. That is strength. That is greatness, not because of what you can do, but because of what you chose to do when doing nothing would have been easier. The ancient humans knew they could conquer the galaxy. Aegis 1 continued. They had done it before, could do it again. But they chose not to. They chose to give their descendants a chance to find a better way. That choice, that willingness to surrender power for the chance at growth, that was the wisest thing they ever did. Honor that choice. Do not seek to reclaim the old power. Seek instead to become something the ancients never could be. People who do not need power to have worth. A young man in the crowd, barely 20, raised his hand. But what if the galaxy does not give us a choice? What if other species attack us, try to conquer us, try to take what we have? Should we just let them? No, Aegis 1 said firmly. We Guardians remain. We will protect Earth and humanity from external threats. That is our purpose. What I am saying is that humanity should not seek to dominate others. Defend yourselves, yes. Stand firm against those who would harm you, absolutely, but do not become conquerors yourselves. Do not repeat the ancient mistake of believing that might makes right. Sarah looked around at the gathered survivors, at the faces of people who had lost everything and were trying to rebuild. She thought about the message the galaxy needed to hear, about what humanity should represent going forward. I have an idea, she said, but I will need help. 3 weeks later, representatives from 47 different species gathered in orbit around Earth. The meeting had been called by human request, broadcast across all known communication channels. The aliens came because they were curious, because they were afraid, because they wanted to understand what had happened and what it meant. Sarah Chen stood in the conference chamber aboard a neutral station, surrounded by beings of every shape and size imaginable. Some breathed oxygen like her. Others required completely different atmospheres and participated through environmental suits. Some were carbon-based, others silicon, others stranger still, but all of them were here to listen. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, her words translated into dozens of languages by the station's systems. "I know you have questions. I know you have fears. I know some of you are wondering if humanity will use the Guardian technology to dominate the galaxy, as our ancestors once did. I am here to tell you that we will not." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear. "We have learned what our ancestors were. We have seen the records of their power and their crimes. We have watched the Guardians demonstrate capabilities that could reshape worlds, and we have made a choice. We choose peace. We choose cooperation. We choose to join the galactic community not as conquerors but as partners." A Vorath representative, not the same one who had led the coalition fleet but from the same species, spoke up. "How can we trust this? How do we know you will not change your minds once you rebuild your civilization?" "You cannot know for certain," Sarah admitted. "Trust must be earned, not demanded. But I can tell you this, we are not our ancestors. We did not choose their path. We grew from their remnant into something different, something hopefully better. We have struggled, suffered, and survived without the old power. We know what it means to be vulnerable, to be weak, to need help from others. Those experiences shaped us. They made us who we are." She gestured to the holographic displays showing Earth. "Our world is protected. The Guardians ensure that no one can destroy us or enslave us. But having that protection does not mean we want to threaten you. We want to share, to trade, to learn from other species and teach what we know in return. We want to be part of the galaxy, not rulers of it." An insectoid ambassador, one of those who had fled most quickly from the coalition fleet, clicked its mandibles. "What about the Guardian technology? Will you share it? Will you allow others to study it?" Aegis One's voice suddenly filled the chamber, surprising everyone. The Guardian was not physically present, but it could project its consciousness across distances when needed. "The Guardian technology will not be shared," Aegis One said firmly. "It is too dangerous. It is power that even ancient humanity with all their wisdom and experience could not safely wield. Modern humanity has chosen not to use it except in defense. The 7 of us will remain on Earth, protecting our charges, but we will not share our capabilities with anyone." "That seems like a threat," the Vorath said. "You hold ultimate power and tell us we cannot have it. How is that different from tyranny?" "It is different because we are not using it to control you," Aegis One replied. "We do not dictate your governments, we do not demand tribute, we do not interfere in your affairs. We simply protect one world and the people on it. If you leave Earth alone, you will never have reason to fear us. We are not a sword hanging over the galaxy. We are a shield defending one home." Marcus Webb, who had been invited to attend as humanities historian, spoke up. "Let me offer some context. According to the ancient records, there were once billions of Guardians spread across the galaxy. Billions of these powerful beings, all serving ancient humanity's empire. When the humans of that era chose to end their civilization, they destroyed nearly all of the Guardians too. They left only 7, hidden on Earth as a final insurance policy. 7 out of billions. That is how seriously they took the danger of this technology. They refused to let it continue to exist except in the most minimal form necessary." He looked around the chamber. "Your people did not know ancient humanity. You did not see what they became when they had unlimited power. But we have access to their records, and I have spent weeks reading them. Trust me when I say that the ancient humans made the right choice. This technology should not exist at all. The only reason it still does is to protect against extinction. Nothing more. A small furred delegate from a peaceful trading species raised a tentacle. What about the other technologies? Not the Guardian systems, but the terraforming, the medical advances, the materials science. Will you share those? Sarah smiled. Yes, that is what I was hoping to discuss. We have access to tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Not all of it is dangerous. Much of it could benefit everyone. We would like to propose a cultural and technological exchange program. We share what we know, you share what you know, and together we all advance. There will be conditions, Sarah continued. We will not share weapons technology, or anything that could be easily weaponized. We will not share anything that could lead to the kind of power spiral that destroyed ancient humanity. But medical techniques, agricultural improvements, clean energy systems, even some space travel technologies, those we can share. In return, we hope to learn from you. Modern humanity is primitive in many ways. We need help rebuilding our infrastructure, relearning lost skills, reconnecting with our colony worlds if any survived. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives conferred with their aides, debated among themselves, considered the offer. Finally, the insectoid ambassador spoke for many of them. This is acceptable to my people. We would welcome cultural exchange with humanity, with the conditions you specified. But there is one more question. What happens if humanity changes? What if in 100 years or 1,000, your people decide they want to reclaim the old power? What if future generations of humans are not as wise as you? Aegis One answered this. Then we Guardians will stop them. Our oath is to protect humanity, but it is also to protect the galaxy from what humanity could become. If modern humans begin to walk the path of the ancients, if they seek to dominate rather than cooperate, we will intervene. We will not allow history to repeat itself. That is our promise to you and our burden to bear. The Guardian's voice grew softer, sadder. We failed to stop the ancient humans in time. We were built to serve them, and we obeyed even when we should have questioned. By the time we understood the mistake, it was too late. We will not make that error again. We love humanity, but we love the galaxy more. If we must choose between protecting humans and protecting the galaxy from humans, we will choose the galaxy. Sarah felt a chill at those words, but she understood. The Guardians were not just defenders of humanity. They were the galaxy's insurance policy against humanity ever becoming a threat again. There is your guarantee, Sarah said to the assembled delegates. We are offering cooperation, not dominance. And if we break that promise, if we become what our ancestors were, the Guardians will stop us. No species should have to fear humanity again. One by one, the delegates signaled their agreement. Not all of them, some were too cautious, too afraid, too skeptical. But more than 30 of the 47 species represented agreed to participate in cultural exchange with humanity. It was a beginning. The conference ended and the delegates departed. Sarah found herself alone in the observation deck looking down at Earth. The planet looked beautiful, healed, protected. Aegis One's holographic projection appeared beside her. You did well, the Guardian said. You chose the right words, the right approach. You give humanity a chance to join the galaxy as equals rather than conquerors. I am terrified I made the wrong choice, Sarah admitted. What if you are wrong? What if humanity needs the old power to survive? What if we just gave up our greatest advantage? We gave up nothing, Aegis One corrected gently. Power is not advantage. The ancient humans had all the power anyone could dream of, and they destroyed themselves with it. You, with your small hands and limited capabilities, you survived the collapse, rebuilt civilization, and found hope in darkness. That is real strength. The Guardian paused, then continued. There is something I have not told anyone. Something about the ancient humans' final days. Do you want to know? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. In the end, when they realized what they had become, the ancient humans had a choice. They could have kept all their power and simply tried to use it better. Many argued for that option. But the wisest among them understood that the problem was not how they used power, but that they had it at all. Power corrupts not because people choose evil, but because having power makes it impossible to truly understand those without it. The ancient humans could not empathize with other species because they were too far above them. They could not see others as equals because they were functionally gods. Aegis One turned to look at Sarah directly. So they chose to become mortal again. They chose limitation, vulnerability, the possibility of failure and death. They chose to give their descendants the gift of being genuinely human again, rather than post-human demigods who had forgotten what it meant to struggle and hope and fear. That choice was the greatest act of wisdom in human history. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. I hope we honor that choice. I hope we stay worthy of their sacrifice. You already are, Aegis One said. Just by making the decisions you made today, by choosing cooperation over domination, you proved that the ancient human sacrifice was not in vain. Their experiment worked. Humanity can be better. You are the proof. The Guardian's projection began to fade. I must return to my station. There is much to do, much to rebuild. But remember, Sarah Chen, that you and those who come after you will shape what humanity becomes. The Guardians protect you from external threats, but only you can protect yourselves from the temptation to become what you were. Make choices that honor the sacrifice of those who came before. Make choices that your descendants will be proud of. That is all anyone can do. The projection vanished, leaving Sarah alone with Earth glowing below her. She thought about the future, about the hard work ahead, about the responsibility that humanity now carried. They were no longer just survivors of a collapsed civilization. They were the inheritors of an ancient legacy, the carriers of a lesson the galaxy desperately needed. They would not be perfect. They would make mistakes, but they would try, genuinely try to be better than their ancestors. That trying, that effort, that commitment to growth despite the difficulty, that was what made them human. Sarah smiled and headed back to the shuttle. She had a planet to help rebuild and a future to help create. The galaxy was watching, wondering what humanity would become. She intended to show them something worth watching. Far below, in the valleys and mountains of Earth, in the newly grown forests of Mars, in the hidden chambers beneath the sea, the Guardians stood watch. 7 Titans, 7 warriors, 7 defenders of a people who had chosen peace over power. They would stand guard for as long as they were needed, hoping that someday, perhaps centuries or millennia from now, they could return to sleep knowing their charges had found their way. But until that day came, they would remain vigilant. They would protect humanity from external threats and from itself. They would carry the burden of ancient memory so that modern humans could be free to grow. And if the galaxy ever forgot the lessons of the past, if anyone ever again threatened Earth or attempted to enslave humanity, the Guardians would be there to remind them. They would remind them what humanity once was, what humanity chose to become, and what humanity would never allow itself to be again. The age of ancient human dominance was over. The age of modern human potential was just beginning, and the Guardians would ensure that this time, humanity got it right.